On a cold winter afternoon, a single father was working in an old car garage with his 7-year-old daughter. Amid the falling snow, he suddenly noticed a young woman at a bus stop holding a freezing newborn. Without a moment's hesitation, he rushed over, wrapped his worn scarf around the tiny child, and hurried them to the hospital. What he didn't know was that the woman he had just saved was the long-lost daughter of a billionaire, and that single act of kindness would change both of their lives forever. Before we dive deeper into this story, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. Oh God, Malik breathed, staring at the motionless figure on the bench across the street. He moved quickly now, all hesitation vanishing in an instant, urgency overriding caution. His boots hit the pavement hard as he crossed Webster Avenue, Kiara's small hand gripping his tightly. The woman on the bench didn't respond when he shook her shoulder, gently at first, then with more force. Miss, you need to wake up right now." Her skin was cold to the touch, too cold, and the baby in her arms wasn't moving except for the shallow rise and fall of its chest. Malik looked around the street, searching for help, but the few pedestrians hurried past with eyes deliberately averted. Nobody wanted to get involved. Nobody wanted the complication of someone else's crisis on a Saturday afternoon when they had their own lives to live. But Malik couldn't walk away. Not from this, not from a baby who might not make it through the next hour if someone didn't intervene. Just a few hours earlier, Malik Washington had been standing in the open bay of his garage, hands blackened with grease, staring at an engine that refused to cooperate. The Saturday before Christmas had arrived, cold and gray over the South Bronx, the kind of afternoon where breath turned to vapor and the wind cut through layers of clothing like they weren't there. The Honda Civic's owner needed it by Monday morning for her commute to work as a home health aide, and Malik had promised he'd have it ready. He always kept his promises, even when keeping them meant working through the weekend with his 7-year-old daughter for company. "Daddy, I'm bored," Kiara had announced from her perch atop a stack of tires, swinging her legs in a rhythm only she could hear. Malik had glanced over at his daughter, at the pink coat that was getting too small for her, at the knitted hat Teresa had made 3 winters ago before the cancer came. Everything was getting small. Children grew, bills grew, but paychecks stayed stubbornly the same. The rent was due in 5 days, and after paying it, there'd be almost nothing left for Christmas presents. He'd already bought 2 small gifts for Kiara from the thrift store, wrapped them carefully and hidden them in his closet. They'd have to be enough. "Just a little longer, baby girl," Malik had said, wiping his hands on a rag that was more grease than cloth. "Then we'll go see the Christmas lights downtown like I promised. Maybe get hot chocolate if we've got enough left after groceries." 3 years since Teresa died, and some days Malik still reached for the phone to call her before remembering she wouldn't answer. 3 years of being both mother and father, of braiding hair he couldn't quite get right, of lying awake at night wondering if he was doing enough, being enough. The garage kept them housed and fed, barely, but there was never margin for error, never breathing room for unexpected expenses. Just last week, the truck's check engine light had come on again, another repair he'd have to figure out how to afford. Malik had been trying to focus on the Honda's engine, running through diagnostic possibilities in his mind when Kiara spoke up. "Daddy, look, that lady's sleeping on the bench." He'd glanced up, following his daughter's gaze to the bus shelter across the street. A figure was curled on the wooden bench, motionless in a way that didn't look like normal rest. Even from that distance, Malik could see the inadequacy of her clothing, the way no one passing by seemed to notice or care. The South Bronx was full of people sleeping where they shouldn't, full of struggles that weren't his to fix. He had his own daughter to worry about, his own bills threatening to bury him. "She's probably just waiting for the bus," Malik had said, turning back to the engine. "The buses aren't running that way today," Kiara had pointed out with the matter-of-fact logic of a child who paid attention to details. "Remember the sign we saw this morning? They closed the route for construction." Kiara was right, the city had shut down this bus line for weekend repairs, which meant the shelter was just a bench now, offering no protection from the wind that was picking up as afternoon faded toward evening. Malik had tried to refocus on the Honda, but his eyes kept drifting back to that motionless figure. Something pulled at him, some echo of Teresa's voice in his head. She'd always said that how we treat people when helping them costs us something. That's the real measure of character. She'd made him promise in those last lucid days before the morphine took over completely, that he wouldn't let the world's hardness make him hard in return. Come on, Kiara, Malik had heard himself say, surprising himself with the decision even as he made it. Let's take a quick walk, and that's what had brought him here. To this moment, shaking a frozen woman's shoulder while her baby's lips turned an alarming shade of blue. Now Malik unwrapped the scarf from his own neck, the one Teresa had knitted him 3 winters ago, with blue yarn she'd said matched his eyes. He laid it carefully over the baby, and the infant stirred slightly, making a sound so weak it was almost lost in the wind. Alive, but for how much longer in this cold? Kiara, run back to the garage and get my phone, Malik said, his voice urgent but controlled because scaring his daughter wouldn't help anyone. It's on the workbench, quick as you can, baby girl. Kiara took off running, and Malik turned back to the woman, shaking her shoulder harder now, almost rough in his desperation to wake her before it was too late. Ma'am, your baby needs help, you need to wake up. Please wake up. Finally, mercifully, the woman's eyes snapped open with a gasp of pure terror. Emma Hartley surfaced from unconsciousness like someone drowning, breaking through into a world of cold and fear and confusion. The first coherent thought was that someone was touching her. The second was that Lily wasn't in her arms anymore. She lunged forward with a mother's instinctive panic, her frozen muscles screaming in protest, and saw a tall black man holding something wrapped in blue fabric. Her daughter. A stranger was holding her daughter. Give her back, Emma croaked, her throat raw from exposure and dehydration. She tried to stand but her legs wouldn't obey, wouldn't bear her weight. Don't touch her, give me my baby. The man stepped back but didn't release Lily, and Emma felt terror spike through her chest because she was too weak to fight, too cold to run, too far gone to protect her child the way a mother should. Your baby is hypothermic, the man said, his voice urgent but somehow not threatening. Look at her lips, they're blue. That's not just cold, that's a medical emergency. I'm trying to help you. Emma forced herself to focus, to really look at Lily's face instead of just reacting to the fear. Her daughter's lips were blue. Actually blue, not pink-tinged or pale, but blue like something you'd see in a medical textbook under the heading of severe hypothermia. The realization cut through Emma's panic like a knife. How long had they been like that? When had Emma stopped being able to see clearly, to assess danger accurately, to be the mother Lily needed? She'd fallen asleep on this bench sometime in the early afternoon, exhausted from 2 nights of walking to stay warm. That meant they'd been here for hours, maybe 3 or 4, as the temperature dropped and the winter sun faded. I don't have money for doctors, Emma said, hating how her voice broke, hating the admission of helplessness but knowing there was no point in pretending otherwise. There's a free clinic 4 blocks from here, the man said, looking at her with eyes that seemed genuinely concerned rather than judgmental. No payment required, no insurance needed, just medical care. Please let me take you both there. Your baby needs help now, not in an hour, not tomorrow. Now. Trust was a luxury Emma couldn't afford. 6 months ago, she'd trusted James when he said he loved her, when he promised they'd figure things out together even though she was pregnant. She'd trusted her adoptive parents, Richard and Margaret Johnson, when they said they'd always support her no matter what. She'd trusted the system to have safety nets for people who fell through the cracks. Every single time, that trust had shattered, leaving her more alone than before, more certain that the only person she could rely on was herself. But herself wasn't enough right now. Herself had failed so completely that her baby's lips were blue and she couldn't feel her own legs. Okay, Emma whispered, the word feeling like surrender and salvation all at once. The clinic. The man nodded, and Emma caught a glimpse of relief in his expression before he shifted into action mode. I'm Malik, he said as he helped her stand, his arms steady around her waist when her legs threatened to give out completely. That's my daughter Kiara. My garage is right across the street. Can you walk if I help you? Emma tried to answer, tried to do anything besides focus on the agony of feeling returning to legs that had gone numb from hours in the cold. Each step across Webster Avenue felt like walking on knives, pins and needles multiplied by 1,000, but Malik's arm kept her upright and moving forward. A little girl ran ahead of them, maybe 7 or 8 years old, holding keys in her small hand with the serious concentration of a child given an important task. The truck was old, probably 15 years old at least, with duct tape holding the passenger seat upholstery together. But it was marginally warmer than outside, and right now that was everything. Emma collapsed into the back seat and curled around Lily, trying to share her inadequate body heat with her daughter, even though she barely had any warmth left to share. The baby let out another weak cough, and Emma felt each rattling breath like a physical blow to her chest. Malik started driving, his eyes moving between the road and the rearview mirror where he could see Emma and Lily. "When did you last eat?" he asked, his tone careful, like he was trying to assess the situation without making Emma feel interrogated. "I don't know," Emma admitted. Time had gotten strange lately, stretching and compressing in ways that made it hard to track days. Yesterday, maybe the day before, she'd used her last $3 2 days ago to buy formula for Lily and crackers for herself. Since then, nothing. "Kiara, there's a granola bar in the glove compartment, can you pass it back?" The little girl retrieved a slightly crushed granola bar and handed it over, and Emma's hands were tearing open the wrapper before her brain could form the thought to refuse. She ate half, the food hitting her empty stomach like a shock, then tried to give the rest back, because taking food from a child felt wrong even when she was desperate. "You should keep it for yourselves. We've got more at home," the girl said with such certainty that Emma almost believed her, even though the careful way Malik glanced at his daughter suggested it might not be entirely true. But Emma was too hungry to argue, too tired to maintain pride when her body was demanding fuel. She finished the granola bar while Lily coughed again, the sound weaker than before, and Emma felt terror claw at her throat, because what if they didn't make it in time? "What's your baby's name?" Kiara asked, turning around in her seat to look at Emma with eyes that held genuine curiosity rather than pity or judgment. "Lily," Emma managed. "She's 4 months old." "That's really pretty," Kiara said, and something about her smile, about the unguarded kindness in her voice, made Emma's eyes sting with tears she didn't have the strength to shed. "We learned about flowers in school. My teacher said lilies mean hope and new beginnings. I think that's a good name for Christmas." Emma didn't respond, because she couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, couldn't process the simple kindness of a child who'd been taught to see people instead of problems. The clinic appeared faster than Emma expected, warm light spilling from a basement entrance beneath a Baptist church, and the moment they walked through the door, everything shifted into urgent motion. A nurse looked up from the reception desk, and her expression changed from routine to emergency in an instant as she took in Emma's appearance and the bundle in her arms. "How long has she been in the cold?" "I don't know," Emma admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hours, 3 or 4 maybe. I fell asleep on a bench. Bring her back here immediately." What followed was organized chaos. Doctors and nurses converging, checking Lily's temperature, listening to her lungs with expressions that made Emma's heart stop, wrapping her in heated blankets while someone else draped one around Emma's shoulders. Questions came rapid fire, and Emma tried to answer through the fog of her own hypothermia, tried to focus on Lily instead of the way the room kept tilting sideways. Someone brought juice and crackers that Emma consumed without tasting. The overhead lights were too bright, the sounds too loud, but Emma forced herself to stay present, to watch her daughter's face, to silently beg whatever God might be listening to let Lily be okay. Dr. Patricia Morrison approached after what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. She was in her 50s with kind eyes that had probably seen every tragedy the city could offer, and then some. "Your daughter has bronchitis and early-stage hypothermia," the doctor said, her voice calm and professional in a way that somehow made the information less terrifying. "We're treating both, warming her carefully, giving her oxygen and medication for the infection. She's going to be okay, but Emma, if you'd waited much longer, we'd be having a very different conversation." Emma broke then, not quietly, but with loud, gasping sobs that she couldn't control or contain. She'd almost killed her baby. Her pride, her fear of the system, her stubborn refusal to ask for help, all of it had nearly cost Lily her life. What kind of mother let her baby get hypothermia on a park bench? What kind of person was too proud to seek help until it was almost too late? A nurse Emma hadn't noticed before wrapped arms around her, holding her while she fell apart with the practiced comfort of someone who'd done this many times before. "You did the right thing bringing her in," the nurse said softly. "That's what matters now. You're here, she's getting help, and she's going to be okay." When Emma finally calmed enough to look around, she saw Malik and Kiara still there, sitting quietly in the corner of the recovery room. They hadn't left. These strangers who'd stopped when everyone else walked past, they were still here, waiting to make sure Emma and Lily were okay. "Thank you," Emma said, her voice hoarse and broken. "You saved her life, you saved both of us." Malik shook his head, standing and pulling a worn business card from his wallet. "The doctors saved her life. I just drove." He held out the card, and Emma took it with trembling fingers. "Washington Brothers Auto Repair," it read, with an address and phone number in faded print. "If you need anything after you leave here," Malik continued, "a hot meal, a place to warm up, you can call. No strings, no expectations, just an offer." Emma stared at the card, not quite able to process why someone would help her like this, what the angle was, what he wanted in return. In her experience, nobody helped without expecting something back. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Malik was quiet for a long moment, and Emma could see him choosing his words carefully, weighing what to say. "3 years ago, my wife died," he finally said, his voice soft but steady. "Cancer, the medical bills buried us even though we had insurance. We were going to lose everything, the garage, our apartment, all of it, but people helped. Folks from our church brought food every week, paid our utility bills, kept the business running when I couldn't focus on anything except watching Teresa die. My wife, before she passed, she made me promise I'd pay it forward. She said that's what keeps the world human, people helping each other when it costs them something." He met Emma's eyes, and she saw sincerity there, or at least she saw what looked like sincerity, and right now she desperately needed to believe it was real. "So that's what I'm doing. Paying it forward because someone paid it forward for me. That's all." Before Emma could respond, Kiara ran back and pressed something into her palm. A small plastic angel, worn smooth from being carried everywhere, the kind of thing that mattered more because of who'd given it than what it was worth. "Mama gave it to me before she went to heaven," Kiara said with the seriousness of a child sharing something precious. "She said angels watch over people, this one can watch over you and Lily." Emma's throat closed completely. She watched Malik and Kiara leave, father and daughter walking out into the cold December afternoon, and felt something shift in her chest. Not hope exactly, because hope felt too fragile, too dangerous to hold on to when you'd been disappointed so many times. But maybe the possibility that hope could exist again. And for someone who'd been sleeping on park benches with a 4-month-old baby, even the possibility of hope was more than she'd had in a long time. Dr. Morrison returned an hour later with Lily's treatment plan and a question Emma had been dreading. "Your daughter is responding well to the treatment," the doctor said, making notes on her clipboard. "Her temperature is rising steadily, and the oxygen therapy is helping her breathing. We want to keep her overnight for observation, just to be safe. There's a cot in the recovery room, where you can stay with her. But Emma, I need to ask about your situation. Do you have somewhere safe to go after we discharge you tomorrow?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Emma understood all too well. Safe meant more than just not sleeping outside. Safe meant stable housing, regular meals, the kind of resources Emma hadn't had in weeks. Not exactly, Emma admitted, because lying would only delay the inevitable conversation. Dr. Morrison's expression remained professionally neutral, but Emma could see the concern beneath it, could feel the weight of judgment even if it wasn't spoken aloud. "I see, I'm going to have our social worker come talk to you in the morning. Her name is Angela Torres, she's good at her job, and her job is to help people get back on their feet, not punish them. Will you talk to her?" Emma wanted to refuse, wanted to grab Lily the moment she was stable enough and run before the system could sink its teeth into them. But Lily's blue lips flashed through her mind, the reality of how close she'd come to losing everything, and she found herself nodding. "Yes, I'll talk to her." That night, lying on a thin cot in the recovery room, with Lily sleeping peacefully in a proper bassinet for the first time in her life, Emma stared at the ceiling, and took inventory of her situation with brutal honesty. She was 22 years old, she'd been a pre-med student at Columbia University, with a full scholarship, and a future mapped out in careful detail. Then she'd gotten pregnant her senior year by James Thornton, the boy she'd thought she loved, the boy who came from money and connections, and a world Emma had never belonged to. When Emma told James she was pregnant, he told her to get an abortion like it was no big deal, like they were discussing what to have for dinner. When Emma refused, James had ended things immediately, and 2 days later his father's lawyer had shown up at her dorm room with threats wrapped in expensive suits. If Emma ever tried to contact James again, if she ever claimed he was Lily's father, or asked for child support, the Thornton family would destroy her legally. They had money, connections, lawyers who could make problems disappear. Emma was nobody, had nothing, would lose any battle she tried to fight. They offered her $50,000 to sign papers saying James wasn't the father, to disappear and never come back. Emma had refused the money, clinging to pride and a naive belief that she could make it work alone. But pride didn't pay medical bills when her scholarship disappeared along with her grades. Pride didn't keep her from getting evicted when she couldn't make rent after Lily was born. Pride definitely didn't keep her adoptive parents, Richard and Margaret Johnson, from disowning her when she refused to give Lily up for adoption. They'd given her an ultimatum when she was 6 months pregnant: give the baby up or they'd cut her off completely. Emma had chosen Lily. She'd choose Lily every single time. But that choice meant she was alone, completely alone, with a newborn and no support system. She'd been evicted from her room in Queens 6 weeks ago, the week before Thanksgiving. She'd tried shelters, but they were dangerous, overcrowded, and several had suggested they'd need to contact Child Protective Services about a newborn in Emma's situation. So Emma had left, choosing the uncertainty of the streets over the certainty of losing Lily to the system. 6 weeks of surviving hour by hour, of using public restrooms to change diapers, of feeding Lily before feeding herself, of watching her daughter get progressively sicker while telling herself it would pass. They just needed to make it through one more day. And then she'd fallen asleep on a bench, and if Malik Washington hadn't stopped, if he hadn't seen them when everyone else looked away, they would have died. That was the truth Emma had to face in the quiet darkness of the recovery room. They would have died on that bench, and nobody would have cared enough to even notice until it was too late. Emma picked up the business card Malik had left, reading it in the dim light from the hallway. Washington Brothers Auto Repair. A phone number, an address in the South Bronx, and on the back, written in neat handwriting that had to be Malik's, 2 words that made Emma's eyes burn with tears she was too dehydrated to fully shed. "You're safe." Morning arrived with harsh fluorescent light and the rattle of breakfast carts in the hallway. Lily woke hungry and fussy, which Dr. Morrison assured Emma was a very good sign because sick babies didn't have energy to complain. A nurse brought formula and showed Emma to a room where she could feed Lily in private, and for a few minutes, Emma let herself pretend that everything was normal, that they were just a mother and daughter having breakfast together like millions of other families. Angela Torres appeared at 9 o'clock, younger than Emma expected, maybe 30, with warm brown eyes and a demeanor that suggested she'd seen every story the city could offer and wasn't easily shocked by any of them. She sat beside Emma's cot with a folder in her lap, her posture open and non-threatening. "I'm not here to take your baby," Angela said immediately, and Emma appreciated the directness even as she felt skepticism rise. "I need you to believe that, Emma. My job is to help you keep her. But I need complete honesty about your situation so I can actually help. Can you do that?" So Emma told the story, leaving nothing out because partial truth would be worse than full disclosure. Columbia University, the scholarship, the bright future, James Thornton and his family's threats, the Johnsons disowning her, the eviction 6 weeks ago, the shelters that felt more dangerous than the streets, the desperate calculation that if she could just survive until spring when the weather warmed up, she could figure out a plan. She explained how she'd been walking most nights to stay warm, sleeping in short intervals during the day when Lily slept. She admitted falling asleep on the bench, nearly killing her daughter through exhaustion and desperation and misguided pride. Angela listened without visible judgment, taking notes in a legal pad. When Emma finished, the social worker was quiet for a long moment before speaking, and Emma could see her choosing her words with care. "Emma, I'm going to be very direct because sugar-coating this won't help anyone. You're in crisis. A 4-month-old infant cannot survive on the streets, especially not in winter. What happened yesterday cannot happen again. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "I know," Emma whispered, shame and fear making her voice small. "Good. So here's what I'm offering, and I need you to listen carefully." Angela pulled papers from her folder. "I'm giving you 2 weeks, 14 days, to show significant improvement in your circumstances. I need to see that you have stable housing, that you're accessing available resources, that you're actively working toward long-term stability. If I don't see meaningful progress in 2 weeks, I'll have to file a report with Child Protective Services recommending they investigate your fitness as a mother." Emma felt her blood turn to ice, panic rising so fast it made her dizzy. "You said you weren't here to take her." "I'm not," Angela said firmly, her voice steady and clear, "but I'm also not going to leave a baby in a dangerous situation. Emma, I want you to succeed. I'm giving you resources right now, today, to help you succeed." She spread papers on the bed. "These are applications for emergency housing assistance, for food stamps, for WIC, for Medicaid. These are contact numbers for job training programs, for free childcare co-ops, for organizations that specifically help single mothers. And this," she pulled out a separate sheet with her information, "is my direct number. You call me if programs deny you, if you hit obstacles, if you need help navigating the system. I'm not your enemy, Emma, but you have to fight for this. Can you do that?" Emma looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully now with normal color returned to her face, breathing clearly and easily. "I'll do whatever it takes." "Good, that's what I needed to hear." Angela stood, gathering her folder. "I'll check in with you in 3 days to see your progress. Use that time well, Emma." After Angela left, Emma sat holding the folder of papers and feeling overwhelmed. 2 weeks to turn her entire life around. 14 days to go from homeless to housed, from desperate to stable. It felt impossible, like trying to climb a mountain with no equipment and no training. But then she remembered the business card in her pocket, remembered Malik's words about paying it forward, and she thought maybe impossible was just another word for difficult. Emma had survived 6 weeks on the streets with a newborn baby. She could survive 2 weeks of bureaucracy and applications. She had to, because the alternative was losing Lily, and that wasn't something Emma would let happen no matter what it cost her. That night, when the ward had quieted, and the hum of the heaters filled the silence, Emma picked up the business card Malik had left, reading it in the dim light from the hallway. Washington Brothers Auto Repair, a phone number, an address in the South Bronx, and on the back, written in neat handwriting that had to be Malik's, 2 words that made Emma's eyes burn with tears she was too dehydrated to fully shed. "You're safe." She turned the card over in her hands for a long time, her thumb tracing the letters until they blurred. The words felt like something she wanted to believe but didn't quite dare to. Finally she reached for the hospital phone on the table beside her cot. Her fingers shook as she dialed. 1 ring, 2, 3. A man's voice answered, warm and familiar. "Washington Brothers." Emma froze. The words she'd rehearsed, "It's Emma, from the clinic. I don't know where to go. Can you help me?" vanished before she could speak them. Her throat tightened. What was she even thinking? Calling a man she barely knew to ask for help again. The shame came fast, hot, and suffocating. "Sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Wrong number." She hung up before he could respond, the dial tone humming softly in the stillness. For a long time she just sat there staring at the phone, feeling both relief and regret twist inside her chest. Asking for help felt like admitting defeat, and Emma had spent too long pretending she was strong enough not to need saving. When morning came she decided she'd try again tomorrow. Maybe after some sleep. Maybe when she didn't feel so small. Emma and Lily were discharged late that afternoon. Sunday, with prescriptions for Lily's bronchitis that the clinic filled for free, detailed instructions for follow-up care, and Angela Torres's folder of resources clutched in Emma's hand. They stood on the clinic steps and Emma realized with sick certainty that she had no idea where to go next. It was nearly 5 o'clock, the winter sun already setting, the temperature dropping fast. The shelter system felt too risky now, with Angela Torres watching and waiting to see progress. But Emma had no money for even the cheapest hotel, and going back to the streets after what had just happened felt like admitting defeat, like proving everyone right who'd said she couldn't do this alone. Before Emma could decide, a familiar truck pulled up to the curb. Malik climbed out, and Kiara waved from the passenger seat with the enthusiasm of a child who didn't understand why adults always looked so worried about everything. "Thought you might need a ride," Malik said, his tone casual, like this was the most normal thing in the world. Checking on homeless women he'd just met the day before. "How did you know we were being discharged today?" Emma asked, suspicious despite herself, because in her experience people didn't just show up unless they wanted something in return. "Called the clinic this morning to ask about visiting hours. Nurse mentioned you'd probably be released this afternoon." He shrugged like it was nothing, like this level of concern for a stranger was just what people did. "Figured you might not have anywhere to go." Emma wanted to lie, to pretend she had everything under control, to maintain some shred of dignity. But she was so tired of lying, of pretending, of trying to seem like she was managing when she was barely surviving hour to hour. "I don't," she admitted, the words tasting like failure. "I have nowhere to go." Malik nodded like he'd expected this answer, like it didn't change anything important. "Okay, let's get you both somewhere warm while we figure out next steps." They drove through the South Bronx in silence, and Emma watched the city change through the truck's window. Buildings showed their age here, facades crumbling in places, stores with security bars covering windows and doors. Empty lots waited for development that probably wasn't coming, but there was life too, Christmas decorations in windows despite the poverty, people calling to each other across streets, a sense of community Emma hadn't seen in the wealthier neighborhoods where everyone looked through each other like strangers were invisible. Washington Brothers Auto Repair appeared around a corner, a two-bay garage with an apartment above it accessed by an external staircase. Malik pulled around back and killed the engine, then sat for a moment without speaking, his hands still on the wheel. Emma waited, holding Lily close, wondering what came next but too exhausted to guess. "I've been thinking about your situation," Malik finally said, still not looking at her. "About what that social worker probably told you, about the 2-week deadline. And I have a proposal, but I need you to hear me out completely before you decide anything." Emma's grip on Lily tightened automatically, defensive instincts rising. "Okay, I have a small apartment above the garage, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. It's not fancy, the heat's temperamental, and the hot water runs out fast, but it's warm and it's safe." He turned to look at her now, his expression serious. "You and Lily could stay there temporarily while you get back on your feet. Not permanently, I want to be absolutely clear about that. Just until you're stable enough to make it on your own." Emma stared at him, trying to understand the angle, the catch, because there was always a catch. Nobody offered help like this without wanting something. "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for help," Malik said simply. "My garage books are a complete disaster. I have no system for tracking what people owe me, no organized way of managing inventory or scheduling, or anything really. Customer service is terrible because I have no patience for people who complain that I'm charging too much when I'm barely charging enough to cover costs. If you've got organizational skills or business sense or just basic common sense about running an office, you'd be earning your keep. This wouldn't be charity, Emma. It would be work, a job, compensation for labor. Why would you do this?" Emma asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "You don't know me, I could be anyone. I could be dangerous, unstable, I could steal from you, hurt your daughter. Why would you take that risk?" "Could be," Malik agreed, and Emma appreciated that he didn't immediately deny the possibility, didn't pretend the risks weren't real. "I'll be honest, I spent half of last night arguing with myself about this exact question. I have Kiara to protect, can't just bring strangers into our home without considering what could go wrong. But I kept thinking about my wife, about what Teresa would do if she were still here." He paused, and Emma saw old grief move across his face like a shadow. She had this gift for seeing people, really seeing them past the surface fear and anger and desperation to who they actually were underneath all that. and I think she'd see someone worth taking a chance on. He pulled out his phone. So I'm going to ask you some hard questions, and I need honest answers. Are you running from someone dangerous? An abusive ex, someone who might come looking for you and bring violence to my doorstep? No, Emma said firmly, the father wants nothing to do with us. His family made sure I understood that very clearly with legal threats. Any substance abuse issues, drugs, alcohol, anything like that? No, nothing. I've never used drugs, barely drank even before I got pregnant. Mental health concerns I should know about. Conditions that might require medication or support I can't provide. Emma hesitated, because this answer was more complicated than a simple yes or no. I've been depressed. Anxious, but that's situational, not chronic. It's because I'm living on the streets with a baby, not because there's something chemically wrong with my brain. I've never been diagnosed with anything, never been on medication, never been hospitalized for mental health reasons. Okay, Malik said, putting his phone away. Here's what I'm proposing. You stay with us temporarily, maybe a month or two, however long it takes. You use this address to apply for all those programs in your social workers folder. You actively work on getting stable, getting independent, finding your own place eventually. And you help me run this garage like an actual business instead of the barely functional mess it is now. You'd have a real address for applications, a real job for your social worker to verify, a stable environment for your daughter. Fair. More than fair, Emma whispered, still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the conditions that would make this impossible. When could we start? Now. Today. Right now if you want. 20 minutes later, Emma stood in a small apartment that looked nothing like what she'd expected. Yes, it was small, the living room and kitchen sharing one open space that couldn't have been more than 400 square feet combined. Yes, the furniture was worn and mismatched, the appliances clearly decades old, but it was immaculately clean, decorated with obvious care and attention. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator in a riot of color and enthusiasm. Photos of a beautiful black woman lined the mantel above a small electric heater, documenting a life cut short but clearly well-lived. A slightly crooked Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments and blinking lights that probably dated back to the 80s. That's Teresa, Malik said, following Emma's gaze to the photos. Kiara's mom. My wife. She was beautiful, Emma said, and meant it. The woman in the photos had warm eyes and a smile that looked genuine, the kind of person who probably made everyone around her feel seen and valued. Inside and out, Malik's voice carried grief that had softened with time but never fully disappeared. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. It was fast and brutal and completely unfair, diagnosed in March, gone by July. It nearly destroyed me, but Kiara needed me to keep going, so I did. You do what you have to do for your kids, right? Emma understood that completely, more than Malik probably realized. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Malik showed Emma the guest bedroom, small but clean with a window overlooking the street, and a double bed that looked like it had been freshly made. It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need it. Bathrooms down the hall, you'll share it with me and Kiara. Kitchen's communal obviously. Help yourself to anything in the fridge or cabinets, and if there's something specific you or Lily need, just let me know and I'll pick it up. It's perfect, Emma said honestly, because after weeks of sleeping on benches and in doorways and under highway overpasses, a real bed in a warm room felt like unimaginable luxury. Thank you, Malik. I don't know how to thank you enough. You can thank me by getting yourself back on your feet, Malik said simply. That's all the thanks I need. That evening, after Kiara had gone to sleep in her room and Lily was settled in a donated bassinet that Mrs. Patterson from the laundromat next door had brought over, Emma and Malik sat at the small kitchen table with mugs of tea. Emma wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, letting the heat seep into fingers that still felt half frozen despite hours of being inside. I need to be honest with you about something, Emma said, forcing herself to meet Malik's eyes across the table. I'm terrified of failing you and disappointing you after you've taken this risk on me. Terrified of the social worker taking Lily away if I can't show enough progress. Terrified of ending up back on the streets if this doesn't work out. The fear is constant, and I don't know how to make it stop." Malik was quiet for a moment, and Emma watched him choose his words the way she'd seen him do before, like he understood that what he said mattered, that careless words could hurt even when they weren't meant to. "Being scared doesn't make you weak," he finally said. "It makes you human. Anyone in your situation would be scared. But Emma, you can't let fear paralyze you. The next 2 weeks, you have to fight harder than you've ever fought for anything. Apply for every program Angela gave you, follow up on every single lead, show that social worker you're doing everything humanly possible to improve your situation. Can you do that?" "I can do that," Emma said, and she meant it, because the alternative was unthinkable. "Then we'll figure the rest out as we go," Malik said. He stood, stretching muscles tired from a long day's work. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's Monday, we start tackling that list Angela gave you. But tonight, just rest. You're safe here, Emma. I need you to believe that." Those words, "you're safe," hit Emma harder than anything else Malik had said. She cried quietly after he'd gone to bed, curled up in the darkness of the guest room with Lily sleeping beside her in the bassinet, letting tears come that she'd been holding back for weeks. She cried for everything she'd lost, and everything she'd almost lost, and for the impossible kindness of strangers who became something more than strangers when they chose to see you instead of looking away. But underneath the tears was something fragile and new, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Tomorrow she'd start fighting for her future, for Lily's future, for the chance to build something stable from the wreckage of the past 2 months. Tonight she'd let herself rest for the first time since she couldn't remember when. For the first time in weeks, Emma Hartley fell asleep in a real bed, in a warm room, feeling safe, and that alone felt like a miracle. The next 12 days passed in a frenzy of focused action. Emma attacked her situation with the desperate intensity of someone who had everything to lose and less than 2 weeks to prove she deserved to keep it. She spent hours at the public library using the free computers, filling out application after application for housing assistance, for food stamps, for WIC, for Medicaid, for every program Angela Torres's folder mentioned and several more she found through her own research. The responses, when they came at all, were universally discouraging. Waiting lists that stretched for months or years, requirements she couldn't meet without already having the resources she was trying to get. Income verification she couldn't provide, references she didn't have. The system was designed for people who already had something, not for people starting from absolute zero. But the garage work gave Emma something the applications couldn't, a sense of purpose and contribution that went beyond just surviving. Malik hadn't been exaggerating about his books being a disaster. Invoices were scattered across his small office in no particular order, some paid, some outstanding, with no clear system for tracking which was which. Customer files were incomplete or missing entirely. His tax records looked like they'd been organized by throwing papers in the general direction of a filing cabinet, and hoping for the best. Emma dove into the chaos with relief, creating order from disorder, building systems that actually functioned. She created a simple database, organized files by date and customer, set up a billing schedule that ensured Malik actually collected what people owed him. It felt good to use her brain for something other than calculating how many days she could stretch $3, good to be useful in a tangible way that had immediate visible results. "This is incredible," Malik said one evening, standing in his office doorway and staring at the organized space like he was seeing it for the first time. "I can actually find things now. I know what people owe me, and when their payments are due. This is game-changing for the business, Emma." "Seriously, it's just basic organizational theory," Emma said, but she felt pride warm her chest anyway. Pride in doing something well, in contributing something valuable, in being more than just a charity case taking up space in someone else's home. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson from the laundromat next door became Emma's unofficial guide to the neighborhood and its rhythms. The elderly white woman would appear most afternoons with containers of soup or casserole or whatever she'd made too much of, asking no questions about Emma's circumstances, simply accepting her presence as natural and right. "Malik's good people," Mrs. Patterson told Emma one afternoon, handing over a still warm container of chicken and dumplings. "Lost his wife young, never let it make him bitter or hard. keeps helping folks even when he barely has enough for himself. You're lucky to have him looking out for you, honey. I know, Emma said, and she did know, understood the gift she'd been given, even if she didn't entirely understand why she'd been chosen to receive it. It was on the 13th day, a Friday afternoon, with just one day left until Angela Torres's 2-week deadline, that Mrs. Patterson arrived, carrying something other than food. She held a newspaper folded to a specific page, her expression more serious than Emma had seen before. Emma, honey, Mrs. Patterson said, settling into a chair at the kitchen table where Emma was working on applications. You need to see this. I don't know what it means, but it seems important, and I thought you should know. The article was on the society page of the New York Times, not a section Emma usually read because the lives of wealthy people felt like they existed in a different universe entirely from hers. But the headline caught her attention immediately, made her hands start shaking before she'd even finished reading it. Billionaire Reginald Hartley renews search for missing daughter on anniversary of kidnapping. Emma's vision narrowed to a tunnel. Hartley. Her birth name, the name she'd kept private in her heart, even when the Johnsons had legally changed it to Johnson when she was 5 years old. The name that connected her to people she'd never known, to a past that had always felt like it belonged to someone else, to questions her adoptive parents had refused to answer. She forced herself to read the article, each word landing like a physical blow. 22 years ago, on November 23, 1995, billionaire real estate developer Reginald Hartley and his wife Victoria had lost their only child when 3-month-old Emma Grace Hartley was kidnapped from their Manhattan penthouse. Despite an extensive FBI investigation and a $5 million reward that still stood today, the child had never been found. Reginald, now 73 years old, continued to search every year on the anniversary of the kidnapping, believing his daughter was alive somewhere, living under a different name, possibly not even knowing her true identity. The article listed specifics that made Emma's heart pound so hard she could hear it in her ears. Birth date, August 15, 1995. Emma's birthday, the day she'd always celebrated, even though the Johnsons had made it feel more like an obligation than a celebration, more like they were marking the day they'd taken her in out of Christian charity, than actually celebrating her existence. Distinguishing features, a small strawberry-shaped birthmark on the left shoulder blade, approximately 1 inch in diameter. Emma's hand moved automatically to her shoulder, to the mark she'd always had, the mark Margaret Johnson had dismissed as nothing special when Emma asked about it as a child, just a common birthmark that lots of people had. Let me see, Malik said gently, and Emma realized he'd come into the kitchen from the garage, drawn by the tension that must have been radiating from her like heat. Emma pulled her shirt aside with trembling hands, exposing the birthmark on her left shoulder blade. It was exactly where the article described, exactly the shape mentioned, strawberry red against her pale skin, roughly the size of a quarter. It's just a coincidence, Emma said, but her voice shook badly enough that the words didn't convince anyone, least of all herself. Lots of people have birthmarks in that general area. Hartley's not that uncommon a name. The birthday could be wrong on my adoption papers, that happens sometimes. With the exact same birth date and the exact same birthmark in the exact same location, Mrs. Patterson asked quietly, her voice gentle but insistent. Emma, honey, you need to contact this man. You need to find out the truth about where you came from. I can't, Emma said, and panic was rising in her chest now, making it hard to breathe, making the room feel too small. What if it's true? What if I really am his daughter? He's a billionaire, he has lawyers and money and power. He could take Lily away, say I'm unfit because I was homeless, because I let her get hypothermia on a park bench. What judge would side with me over someone with that kind of wealth? I'd lose her, and I can't lose her, she's all I have. You're not thinking clearly, Malik said, his voice firm in a way Emma hadn't heard before, cutting through her panic with calm certainty. If this man spent 22 years searching for you, if he never gave up hope, if he still believes you're alive somewhere, why would he punish you for surviving? Why would he take your child? That doesn't make any sense, Emma. Because rich people operate by different rules, Emma said bitterly, and she heard James Thornton's voice in her memory, heard his father's lawyer explaining exactly how powerless she was against their money and connections. They use their wealth to control people, to get what they want. The Thorntons proved that. They threatened to destroy me if I ever tried to claim James was Lily's father. What if Reginald Hartley is the same? What if he decides I'm not good enough, not worthy of being his daughter, and uses his money and power to take everything from me? Or Mrs. Patterson interjected softly, reaching across the table to take Emma's hand. He's a grieving father who's been searching for his daughter for 2 decades. Emma, you deserve to know the truth about where you came from. And if this man really is your father, he deserves to know you're alive, and that he has a granddaughter. Don't let fear of what might happen stop you from finding out what's true. They sat in heavy silence while Emma's mind raced through possibilities and implications, through scenarios both hopeful and terrifying. If this was true, if she really was Emma Grace Hartley who'd been stolen from her family as a 3-month-old baby, then everything she'd believed about her life was wrong. The Johnsons weren't just strict religious parents who'd disowned her for getting pregnant out of wedlock. They were kidnappers, or at least they'd knowingly raised a kidnapped child, participated in fraud, built their entire family on a crime. Every memory of her childhood was tainted by that knowledge, every moment of feeling like she didn't quite fit, like she was performing a role rather than living authentically, suddenly making horrible sense. If I do this, Emma finally said, looking at Malik with eyes that felt too large for her face, if I contact him and it turns out to be true, everything changes. My whole life, everything I thought I knew about myself, it's all a lie. I don't know if I can handle that right now on top of everything else. You can handle more than you think, Malik said quietly. You've already proven that. But Emma, you don't have to decide anything today. Let's just find out if it's true first. Take it one step at a time. Will you at least call the number in the article, and see what happens? Emma looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms, oblivious to the earthquake happening in her mother's life. Okay, she whispered. I'll call. But Malik, if I do this, if I contact him, will you come with me? To any meeting, any conversation. I can't do this alone. Of course, Malik said immediately, without hesitation. Whatever you need, Emma, we're in this together now. You're not alone anymore. The next morning, Saturday, hands shaking so badly she could barely dial, Emma called the number listed in the article for the Hartley family's private investigator. A professional female voice answered on the second ring. Mitchell Security Services, this is Rachel speaking. How may I help you? My name is Emma Hartley, Emma said, forcing the words past the tightness in her throat. I was born August 15, 1995. I have a birthmark on my left shoulder blade, strawberry-shaped, about an inch across. I think I might be the person Mr. Hartley is looking for. The pause that followed felt endless, stretching into eternity. Then Rachel's voice came back, carefully controlled but with an undercurrent of excitement. Can you please hold for just a moment? Emma waited, and the silence on the line felt heavy with significance, with the weight of possibilities that could change everything. Then a man's voice, deep and authoritative and somehow gentle all at once. This is Thomas Mitchell. I've worked for the Hartley family for 20 years, handling security and investigations. We've had hundreds of calls over the years from people claiming to be Emma Grace, people looking for the reward money or attention or just confused about their own identities. I don't mean to sound harsh, but I need to verify some information before we proceed any further. Is that acceptable to you? Yes, Emma said, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Whatever you need to know, I'll tell you. For the next 25 minutes, Mitchell asked questions with the thoroughness of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to take anything at face value. Birth date, birthmark location and description, adoption circumstances, any memories of her early childhood. When Emma mentioned Richard and Margaret Johnson from Queens, Mitchell's tone shifted dramatically, became sharp and focused in a way it hadn't been before. The Johnsons, he repeated, and Emma could hear rapid typing in the background, the click of keys moving fast. Richard and Margaret Johnson, who moved to Queens in late 1995. We've investigated them multiple times over the years, but we could never prove the connection, never found hard evidence linking them to the kidnapping. Miss Hartley, can you tell me anything about your adoption that seemed unusual or suspicious? Anything your parents said about how they got you?" So Emma explained what little she knew, which wasn't much. The secrecy around her adoption, the way her parents never wanted to discuss it, the lack of documentation she'd ever actually seen with her own eyes, her parents' anger whenever she asked questions about her birth family or where she'd come from originally, the way they'd always made her feel like the adoption was something shameful they'd done out of Christian duty rather than love, like they'd rescued her from some terrible fate, and she should be grateful rather than curious. "I see," Mitchell said, and Emma could hear the weight of implications in those two words, years of investigation clicking into place. "Miss Hartley, Emma, I need to ask you a direct question and please don't be offended by it. Are you looking for money? Because if this is a scam, if you're after the reward, my client has been through too much pain already, and I won't allow him to be hurt again by false hope." "No," Emma said firmly, anger giving her voice strength. "I didn't even know about any of this until yesterday. I'm not looking for money or rewards or anything like that. I just want to know the truth about where I came from. That's all. I need to understand who I actually am." "I believe you," Mitchell said, his voice gentler now, the suspicion fading. "Miss Hartley, Emma, I'd like to arrange a DNA test as soon as possible. We have Emma Grace Hartley's DNA on file from a baby blanket her mother saved, kept all these years hoping we'd find her someday. If you're really Emma Grace, the test will prove it conclusively beyond any doubt. Would you be willing to do that?" "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "When? Where?" "Today if possible." "Where are you located currently?" Emma gave Malik's address, and Mitchell promised to have a technician there within 3 hours. When she hung up, Emma was shaking so badly that Malik had to help her to the couch, had to physically support her weight because her legs didn't want to hold her anymore. "What if it's true?" Emma whispered, looking at Malik with eyes wide with terror and hope and confusion all tangled together. "What if I really am his daughter and everything I thought I knew about my life is completely wrong? What if the Johnsons stole me from my real parents and I never knew, never even suspected?" "Then we'll deal with it," Malik said, sitting beside her and taking her hand in his, grounding her with physical contact and steady presence. "One step at a time, first the test, then the results, then we figure out what comes next. But Emma, listen to me. Whatever happens, you're still you. Your worth isn't determined by who your biological parents are or what happened when you were a baby. You're the person who protected her daughter through 6 weeks on the streets. You're the person who's fighting her way back from nothing with everything you have. That doesn't change regardless of what some DNA test says. That's who you are, not what happened to you." The technician arrived exactly 2 hours and 45 minutes later, professional and efficient, treating this like routine work even though it felt like the most significant moment of Emma's entire life. A simple cheek swab, carefully documented and sealed in a sterile container with labels and official paperwork, and it was done. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. Results in 48 to 72 hours, the technician explained, packing everything carefully into her case. "Mr. Mitchell will call you directly as soon as we have confirmed results. Try not to worry in the meantime. Try not to worry, as if that were possible when Emma's entire understanding of her identity hung in the balance. Those 3 days were pure torture, the longest 72 hours of Emma's life. Emma went through the motions of daily life, caring for Lily, working in the garage office, meeting with Angela Torres on Monday afternoon for her 2-week check-in. The social worker seemed cautiously optimistic, pleased with the stable living situation and Emma's clear efforts to improve her circumstances through all the applications she'd submitted. Angela extended the timeline another month, saying she could see real progress and wanted to give Emma more time to get fully stable. But Emma could barely focus on any of it, her mind constantly circling back to the impossible possibility that her entire life had been built on a lie. That she'd been stolen from a family that loved her and wanted her, that the Johnsons had built their version of family on the foundation of someone else's tragedy. On Tuesday evening, exactly 71 hours after the test, Emma's phone rang. Unknown number. Her hands shook as she answered, and Malik moved close to her side, offering silent support. "Miss Hartley, this is Thomas Mitchell." His voice was different now, soft and almost reverent, filled with emotion he wasn't bothering to hide. "The DNA results came back this afternoon. Emma, you're a perfect match. 99.99% certainty. You're Emma Grace Hartley, you're Reginald's daughter. The world stopped spinning. Emma heard the words but couldn't process them, couldn't make them mean anything real or concrete. After 22 years of not quite belonging anywhere, of feeling like she was playing a role in someone else's life, of being told she should be grateful for being rescued from whatever terrible situation she'd come from, she finally had an answer about where she'd actually come from. She was Emma Grace Hartley. She had a real father who'd been searching for her. She had a mother who'd loved her before she died. She had a history, an identity, a truth that was hers. And somewhere in Manhattan, a man who'd never stopped looking was about to learn that his daughter was alive. Everything was about to change. Reginald Hartley wanted to come immediately, that very night. Thomas Mitchell had to spend nearly 20 minutes on the phone convincing his client to wait until the next morning, to give Emma time to process the news and prepare herself emotionally, to not overwhelm her with the intensity of emotions that came from 2 decades of grief suddenly transformed into joy. They compromised on 10 o'clock Wednesday morning, and Emma spent Tuesday night unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling of Malik's guest room and trying to make sense of what her life had become in just 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, she'd been dying on a park bench. Now she was the long-lost daughter of a billionaire. The shift was too massive to comprehend, too surreal to feel entirely real. The Johnsons had known. They must have known she was stolen. The certainty of that settled into Emma's bones like ice. Had they been part of the kidnapping itself? Had they paid someone to take a baby from her real family? Or had they been deceived too, believing the adoption was legitimate until it was too late to turn back without admitting to a crime? Emma's mind churned through possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last, and by the time morning light filtered through the bedroom window, she felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. Malik took the day off work without Emma having to ask, understanding somehow that she needed him there, needed someone stable and grounded to keep her from spiraling into panic. Mrs. Patterson arrived early with breakfast that Emma couldn't eat, her stomach too knotted with anxiety to accept food. Even Kiera was unusually quiet, sensing the adult's tension and responding with the careful stillness of a child who'd learned early to read emotional weather and adjust her behavior accordingly. At exactly 10 o'clock, a sleek black town car pulled up outside the garage, looking absurdly out of place in this neighborhood of rusted trucks and aging sedans. Emma watched from the window as a man emerged, tall and distinguished despite his 73 years, silver hair perfectly combed, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than Emma had spent on everything in the past year combined. A bodyguard followed at a respectful distance, professional and unobtrusive but clearly there to protect his employer. "He's here," Emma whispered, and her voice sounded strange in her own ears like it belonged to someone else. "You've got this," Malik said, standing beside her with one hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Remember, you're not asking him for anything. He's the one who's been searching for 22 years. You're the one with the power here, Emma. You can set the pace, decide what happens next." They met at the apartment door, and for a long moment that stretched into eternity, Reginald Hartley simply stood there staring at Emma with an expression that held so many emotions she couldn't begin to name them all. Wonder, grief, desperate hope, disbelief, fear that this might not be real, that she might vanish like every other false lead had vanished. Then his eyes filled with tears that spilled over unchecked, running down his distinguished face without shame or apology. "You have your mother's eyes," he whispered, his voice breaking on the words like they hurt to say. "Victoria always said you would. Blue as summer sky," she used to say. "I'd forgotten exactly how blue until just this moment. My God, you're real. You're actually real." His gaze dropped to Lily in Emma's arms, and something in his expression transformed into a joy so pure and overwhelming it was almost painful to witness. "And this is Lily," Emma said, her own voice unsteady, tears threatening to spill over. "Your granddaughter. She's 4 months old now." Reginald's composure shattered completely. He stood in the doorway of this modest South Bronx apartment and wept openly, tears streaming down his face while his bodyguard looked away with practiced discretion to give his employer privacy in this moment of overwhelming emotion. "My granddaughter," Reginald repeated, testing the words, tasting their reality. "I have a granddaughter. Could I please come in?" They gathered in Malik's small living room, this billionaire sitting on a worn second-hand couch that had seen better days, unable to take his eyes off Emma and Lily. For a long moment, nobody spoke, the weight of 22 lost years hanging heavy in the air between them, too massive to address directly, too significant to rush past. "I can't believe you're real," Reginald finally said, his voice steadier now but still thick with emotion. 22 years of searching, so many false leads, so many people who turned out to be looking for the reward money rather than actually being my daughter. People who looked a little bit like the age progression photos we had made, people with similar birthmarks that weren't quite right, people who'd convinced themselves they might be Emma Grace even when they weren't. I'd started to think I'd never find you, that you were gone forever, that I'd die without ever knowing what happened to my little girl. "Tell me what happened," Emma said, because she needed to hear the story, needed to understand how her life had been stolen and why. "I need to know everything, from the beginning." So Reginald told her, and the story that emerged was both beautiful and heartbreaking. He told her about Victoria, the brilliant architect who'd designed buildings all over Manhattan, who'd been so passionate about her work but even more passionate about becoming a mother. About their whirlwind romance that everyone said was moving too fast but felt exactly right to both of them. About the joy when Emma was born, how Victoria had cried with happiness holding her daughter for the first time. About Mrs. Lorraine Patterson, the nanny they'd hired with impeccable references and a warm demeanor, who'd seemed so trustworthy, so perfect for the job of caring for their precious daughter. "We didn't know her daughter was desperate for a child," Reginald explained, his voice tight with old anger that had never fully dissipated even after 2 decades. Diane Johnson had tried for years to get pregnant, multiple miscarriages that devastated her emotionally, fertility treatments that didn't work and cost them everything financially. She'd applied to adopt through legitimate channels but was rejected because of documented mental health issues, depression and anxiety that raised red flags with social workers. So she convinced her mother to help her steal what she couldn't have legally. They planned it carefully, methodically, over weeks or maybe months. Emma felt physically sick, her stomach churning with nausea. Johnson. My mother's name was Diane Johnson. I remember her being depressed a lot when I was little, spending days in bed, not really present, even when she was in the room. On November 23, 1995, Mrs. Patterson gave you a bottle with a mild sedative in it, something to make you sleep deeper than normal but not dangerous enough to raise immediate red flags. You fell asleep, which wasn't unusual for a 3-month-old after feeding. She walked out of our building with you in a shopping bag, just walked right out past security with you hidden under groceries, met Diane in a car, waiting around the corner, and they were gone. By the time Victoria and I realized you weren't just sleeping longer than normal, that something was terribly wrong. They were already in Queens creating forged adoption paperwork with the help of someone who knew how to make documents look legitimate. Didn't you investigate? Didn't the police? Emma asked, needing to understand why it had taken so long, why she'd spent 22 years with the wrong family. Of course we investigated, Reginald said, and Emma could hear the old frustration in his voice, the helplessness of having all the money and power in the world but not being able to find his daughter. The FBI got involved immediately, it became a major case, but Mrs. Patterson had covered her tracks brilliantly. She'd given notice 2 weeks before the kidnapping, claimed she was moving to Florida to care for her elderly mother who was ill. She and Diane had planned every detail. The Johnsons moved to Queens the same week, paid cash for everything to avoid paper trails that could be traced, created a false adoption narrative with professionally forged documents that looked absolutely legitimate. It took us years to even identify them as suspects, to connect Mrs. Patterson to Diane Johnson, to realize they were related. When did you know? Emma demanded, needing to understand the timeline, needing to know why nobody had come for her. When did you figure out it was the Johnsons who had me? Reginald hesitated, and Emma saw guilt flicker across his distinguished face, saw the weight of decisions made and not made. We suspected them about 5 years ago, when you would have been 17 years old. But Emma, I need you to understand we couldn't prove it. The adoption papers looked completely legitimate on the surface. Our lawyers said we needed irrefutable evidence before we could act, that accusing them without absolute proof could make things worse, could drive you deeper into hiding if they panicked. We were building a case, gathering evidence piece by piece, planning to approach you carefully once we had everything documented properly. You knew where I was for 5 years and did nothing." Emma's voice was sharp with anger she hadn't known she was feeling until it spilled out, hot and bitter. "I was right there. You could have found me, talked to me, told me the truth, but you did nothing." "We didn't know for certain until it was too late," Reginald said desperately, leaning forward with his hands clasped like he was begging for understanding. "They were one of dozens of leads we were following at any given time. And Emma, when we finally became absolutely sure, when we had enough evidence to be confident beyond doubt, you'd already turned 18 and left their home. You'd vanished into the city. I hired the best investigators money could buy, checked every database, searched every shelter and hospital in New York. But you were gone, like you'd never existed, no paper trail to follow." The fight drained out of Emma as quickly as it had come, replaced by exhaustion and a different kind of anger. This one directed at herself. She sat back heavily, suddenly tired beyond measure. "I left the day after I turned 18. The Johnsons had been making it clear for months that they wanted me gone, that I was a disappointment, that I'd never lived up to their expectations of what an adopted daughter should be. So I left the morning after my birthday and didn't look back. I was so angry at them, so ready to be free, that I didn't think about anything except getting out." "I'm so sorry," Reginald said, and the anguish in his voice was genuine and deep. "I can't give you back the 22 years we lost. I can't undo the pain you experienced or make up for not being there when you needed a father. But Emma, please, I want to be your father now, if you'll let me. I want to know you, really know you, be part of your life, part of Lily's life. Please give me that chance." He pulled an envelope from his jacket with hands that trembled slightly. "I brought photographs. Videos on a flash drive, your first smile, your first laugh, your mother singing you lullabies in the nursery we decorated for you. These belong to you now. They're your history, your proof that you were loved and wanted from the very first moment." Emma took the envelope, and inside were dozens of photos showing a young couple radiant with happiness and love, holding a baby girl who was clearly the center of their universe. She'd been loved like that once, treasured and celebrated, before everything was stolen. "Your mother died 12 years ago, Reginald continued, his voice breaking again, fresh tears spilling down his face. "Breast cancer. She fought so hard, lived longer than the doctors predicted, refused to give up because she wanted to be here when I found you. The last thing she made me promise, literally her dying words, was that I'd never stop looking. She said she knew you were out there somewhere, that she could feel it in her bones like mothers know these things. She believed until her very last breath that I'd find you someday. I'm so sorry," Emma whispered, mourning a mother she'd never known, a woman who'd loved her and searched for her and died without ever knowing what happened to her baby. "I wish I could have met her. I wish things had been different." "So do I," Reginald said softly. "Every single day for 22 years, I've wished things had been different. But Emma, listen to me carefully. None of this was your fault. You were stolen from your family through no action of your own. You survived growing up with people who should have loved you, but clearly didn't, not the way parents should love children. You protected your daughter against impossible odds. You're exactly the kind of person Victoria and I hoped our daughter would become. Strong, resilient, fiercely protective of the people you love, willing to fight for what matters. Don't ever think you're not enough, Emma. You're more than enough." They sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything, letting the weight of revelation settle. Finally Emma spoke, her voice small but determined. "What happens now? Where do we go from here?" "That's entirely your decision," Reginald said firmly, meeting her eyes with obvious sincerity. "I want to be part of your life, but I won't force anything. You're an adult, Emma. You make your own choices about what relationships you want and what pace feels right. I'm just asking for the chance to know you, to be your father if you'll allow it. Whatever you're comfortable with, that's what we'll do." Emma looked at Malik, who gave her an encouraging nod, steady and supportive as he'd been through everything. She looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms, innocent of all this complicated history. She looked at this man who'd never stopped searching, who'd spent 2 decades hoping for exactly this impossible moment. "I'd like that," Emma said quietly, feeling the truth of it even through her fear and uncertainty. "I'd like to try getting to know you, but slowly please. This is overwhelming, and I need time to process everything. Can you give me that? The smile that broke across Reginald's face was like watching the sun rise after the longest, darkest night imaginable. Thank you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion and gratitude. Thank you for giving me this chance. I promise I won't let you down, Emma, I promise. The following weeks brought changes Emma struggled to process even as she tried to adapt to them. Reginald became a regular presence in her life, visiting several times a week, always respectful of boundaries, always asking permission before coming by, slowly and carefully building a relationship brick by patient brick. He brought gifts that Emma usually made him return, because designer baby clothes and expensive toys felt wrong when other families in the neighborhood had so much less, when Mrs. Patterson's grandson still wore shoes with holes in them. He shared endless stories about Victoria, filling in the blank spaces of Emma's first 3 months, showing photographs and home videos that made him weep openly every single time he watched them. He also brought lawyers, an entire team of them. Reginald's legal staff was building a comprehensive case against Richard Johnson, pursuing criminal charges for his role in the kidnapping and fraud. Diane Johnson had died 7 years ago, suicide after years of worsening mental illness that finally consumed her completely. Lorraine Patterson had died 3 years ago of natural causes, but Richard Johnson was still alive, still living in Queens, and Reginald wanted justice with an intensity that bordered on obsession, on vendetta. I need you to testify, Reginald told Emma one evening over dinner at the apartment, his voice intense and urgent. About growing up with them, about what they told you regarding your adoption, about how they treated you. Your testimony could be crucial to getting a conviction, to making sure he faces real consequences for what he did. Emma felt torn, pulled in opposite directions by conflicting loyalties and emotions. Richard Johnson was the only father I knew for 22 years. He was distant and strict, definitely not warm or affectionate, but he wasn't cruel. He never hit me, never abused me. He provided food and shelter and education. I don't know if I can stand up in court and testify against him. He helped steal you from your real family, Reginald said, his voice tight with controlled fury that made his words come out clipped and hard. He participated in fraud, raised a kidnapped child, profited emotionally and possibly financially from my family's grief for 2 decades. He deserves to face consequences for that, Emma. He deserves to be held accountable for the crime he committed against you, against us, against justice itself. Maybe Emma agreed, because part of her did want justice, did want Richard Johnson to face what he'd done. But I need time to process everything before I decide about testifying. This is complicated in ways I'm still trying to understand. Give me time, please. Reginald backed off reluctantly, though Emma could see the effort it cost him to not push harder, to respect her boundaries, when what he wanted was immediate action and revenge. The real tension between them came over the question of where Emma and Lily would live long-term. Reginald owned a penthouse on Central Park West, 15 rooms of luxury overlooking the city, more space than Emma could even imagine needing or filling. He'd already prepared an entire suite for them, decorated it carefully based on what he'd learned about Emma's preferences from their conversations, filled it with everything a young mother and baby could possibly need and then some. He wanted them there, wanted his family close, wanted to make up for lost time by surrounding Emma with comfort and security. Emma refused to even visit, wouldn't even go see what he'd prepared. I can't, she said during a difficult conversation in Malik's living room one evening, with Angela Torres sitting in at Emma's request, because she needed the social worker to understand her reasoning and validate her choice. I can't jump from sleeping on park benches 6 weeks ago to a Manhattan penthouse today. I'll lose myself in that transition. I'll become someone I'm not, someone I don't recognize. I need to build my way up to stability, not have it handed to me complete and perfect. But you're living on someone else's charity right now, Reginald protested, then immediately looked at Malik with apologetic eyes. I don't mean that as an insult to your incredible generosity, Mr. Washington. You've done more for Emma than I can ever repay. But I'm her father, I have resources. I can give Emma and Lily actual security and stability. Emma's not charity, Malik said, his voice level but firm, brooking no argument. She runs my garage office better than I ever did or could. She handles difficult customers with patience I don't have.
She's increased my revenue by 30% in 3 weeks just by organizing my billing system and following up on outstanding invoices. She earns her place here every single day through work and contribution. I have unlimited resources, Reginald argued, his frustration showing through his usually controlled exterior. I can give Emma and Lily security, stability, opportunities, the best education money can buy. Why would she refuse that? Why would anyone choose this? He gestured around the modest apartment, over what I'm offering, because I need to prove I can stand on my own 2 feet. Emma said firmly, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. I've spent my whole life dependent on someone else for my survival and sense of worth. The Johnsons controlled everything through their version of religious duty and conditional love. Then I was at James Thornton's mercy until his family paid me off to disappear. Then I was at the mercy of the streets, dependent on luck and whether people chose to look at me or walk past me. I need to build something that's mine, that I created with my own hands and choices, that nobody can take away from me because I earned it.
Angela Torres spoke up then, her professional voice cutting through the emotional tension. If I may offer a perspective from Child Services, I've been working with Emma for a month now. She's made remarkable, honestly extraordinary progress. She has stable housing, she's employed in meaningful work, she's accessing available resources, she's building a genuine support network in this community. From my perspective, this is exactly what we want to see in cases like Emma's. Disrupting that progress by moving her to an unfamiliar environment, even a luxurious one, could actually be counterproductive to her long-term emotional stability and sense of self-efficacy. Reginald looked stricken, like he'd been slapped. I'm not trying to disrupt anything or hurt anyone. I'm trying to give my daughter the life she should have had all along. The life that was stolen from her. I know, Emma said softly, reaching across to touch his hand, offering comfort even as she held firm to her boundaries. And I appreciate that more than you can possibly imagine, more than I know how to express. But Reginald, the life I should have had is gone. I can't get it back no matter how much money you spend or how many nice things you give me. All I can do is build the life I have now, starting from where I actually am rather than where I wish I could be. And right now, this apartment, this neighborhood, these people who've accepted me without judgment or conditions, this is where I'm building. This is where I'm healing. They compromised eventually, though it clearly cost Reginald something to back down. Emma would stay in the Bronx with Malik for now, but accept Reginald's help in other specific ways. He set up a trust fund for Lily's education and medical care that Emma couldn't touch directly but knew was there, ensuring her daughter would have opportunities Emma herself had lost. He hired the best lawyers not just to pursue Richard Johnson but to establish Emma's legal identity as Emma Grace Hartley and help her navigate the complex process of reclaiming her true name. And he made a substantial investment in Malik's garage, transforming Washington Brothers Auto Repair from a struggling one-man operation barely breaking even into a legitimate business with real growth potential. This is a genuine partnership, a real business investment, Reginald insisted when Malik expressed deep concern about accepting what felt uncomfortably like charity despite Emma's assurances. Emma's management has already improved your revenue stream by 30% in less than a month. With capital to expand, to hire another mechanic or two, to upgrade equipment and expand your customer base, you could easily double or triple your business within a year. You're skilled, you're honest, you're trusted in this community. That's solid business fundamentals. This is smart investing on my part, Mr. Washington, not charity. Don't insult either of us by calling it that. Over the following weeks, a new routine emerged slowly, carefully, like a plant growing toward sunlight. Reginald visited regularly, learned to change Lily's diapers and warm bottles even though he fumbled with the mechanics of it at first, got to know Kiara, who charmed him completely with her straightforward questions and innocent observations. He shared meals at the small kitchen table, laughed genuinely at Kiara's jokes about school and friends, listened with real interest to Emma's detailed plans for the garage expansion and her ideas for community outreach. Slowly, carefully, brick by brick, they built something that started to resemble a father-daughter relationship. One Sunday in early February, about 6 weeks after the DNA test, Reginald invited everyone to his penthouse for dinner. The contrast between worlds was stark and uncomfortable in ways that made Emma's skin prickle with anxiety. Malik's old truck looked absurd pulling up to the Central Park West address, with its uniformed doorman and marble lobby that screamed wealth and exclusivity. The elevator opened directly into Reginald's apartment rather than a hallway, revealing a space so vast and elegant that Emma felt physically sick looking at it, felt like an imposter who'd somehow stolen someone else's life. It's like a palace from fairy tales. Kiara breathed, eyes wide with wonder and innocent excitement at seeing how the other half lived. Inside was even more overwhelming than Emma had feared. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, the view stretching for miles in every direction. Original artwork that Emma recognized from art history textbooks hung on walls lit by perfect museum-quality lighting. Every surface gleamed with the kind of care and expense that spoke of a world Emma had never inhabited and wasn't sure she wanted to. But what caught Emma's attention, what stopped her breath in her chest, was the photograph wall in the main hallway. Pictures of her parents, of baby Emma, professional portraits, and candid snapshots documenting those stolen 3 months before the kidnapping. And new frames recently added, holding photos of Emma and Lily from recent weeks, positioned among the old photos like they'd always belonged there, like the past and present were finally connected again. "I wanted you to see that you've always been part of this home," Reginald said softly, standing beside her and looking at the wall with an expression of mingled joy and grief. "Even when I didn't know where you were, even when I thought I might never find you, you were always here in my heart, always part of this family." He showed them the suite he'd prepared, and Emma's heart broke a little at the obvious love and care that had gone into every detail. A bedroom for Emma decorated in soft blues and grays that reminded her of the ocean. A nursery for Lily with hand-painted murals of flowers and butterflies, a white crib that probably cost more than Malik's truck, toys and clothes organized with meticulous care. A bathroom with a tub deep enough to soak in. A sitting room with bookshelves already filled with books, Reginald had carefully selected based on conversations with Emma about her interrupted education and intellectual interests. "It's beautiful," Emma admitted, because denying that felt like lying and she'd had enough of lies. "But Reginald, it's too much, it's not who I am right now. Maybe someday, but not yet." "It could be who you are," Reginald said, his voice gentle but insistent. "It should be who you are, Emma. This is your birthright, your inheritance. This is the life you were meant to have before it was stolen from you." "Maybe," Emma said, choosing her words carefully, "but it's not the life I have now. And I'm not ready to give up what I've built in the Bronx, not ready to leave the people who helped me when I had nothing. Not yet, maybe not ever. I need you to understand that and respect it." After dinner, while Kiara played in the living room that was bigger than Malik's entire apartment, Reginald and Malik found themselves alone on the terrace overlooking the glittering city spread out below them like a carpet of lights. "She's stubborn," Reginald said, frustration clear in his voice even though he tried to hide it. "She refuses help even when it would make everything so much easier for her, so much safer and more comfortable." "She's independent," Malik corrected gently, his voice calm and understanding. "That's different, and it's important to who she is. Emma needs to feel like she's building her own life with her own hands, not having one handed to her complete and perfect. After everything she's been through, after being controlled and manipulated and pushed around by people with power over her, that need for autonomy isn't just pride or stubbornness. It's survival, it's healing, it's reclaiming herself." "I understand that intellectually," Reginald admitted, his shoulders sagging with the weight of it, "but emotionally, I just want to fix everything for her. I want to give her back everything that was taken to make up for 22 lost years. I want to protect her from ever being hurt or scared or hungry again." "You can't make up for lost time," Malik said with the quiet certainty of someone who'd learned this truth the hard way. "None of us can, no matter how much we wish otherwise. You can only make the most of the time you have now, moving forward, and pushing too hard, trying to force her into a life she's not ready for, that might drive her away completely. Is that a risk you want to take?" Reginald was quiet for a long moment, staring out over the city lights with an expression Emma couldn't read. "You care about her deeply," he finally said, and it wasn't quite a question, more an observation seeking confirmation. "She's become family," Malik said carefully, weighing each word. "She and Lily both. They've brought life back to our home, given Kiara and me something to care about beyond just surviving day to day. Emma's smart and strong, and she's fighting so hard to build something real. I respect that, and I want to support it however I can. I'm glad, Reginald said, and he sounded sincere despite the complicated emotions that must have been churning beneath the surface. I'm glad Emma has people who care about her for who she actually is, not what she represents or what she's connected to. She needs that kind of unconditional support, needs to know her worth isn't tied to me or my money. On the drive back to the Bronx, Emma was quiet, watching the city change through the truck's windows as they left Manhattan's wealth behind and returned to the South Bronx's honest poverty. When they finally pulled up outside the garage, she turned to Malik with tears in her eyes. "Your apartment feels more like home than that penthouse ever could," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "Is that wrong? Should I feel guilty about choosing this over that?" "No," Malik said firmly, reaching over to squeeze her hand with reassuring warmth. "Home isn't about how nice a place is or how much it costs or how many rooms it has. Home is where you feel safe being yourself without pretense or performance. There's no shame in choosing community and authenticity over luxury and isolation, Emma. There's no shame in knowing yourself well enough to make that choice." "Good," Emma said softly, squeezing his hand back, "because that's what I'm choosing. This life, this place, this family we're building together." In the front seat, Kiara smiled with the wisdom of a child who understood more than adults gave her credit for, and something in Malik's chest felt too large for his ribcage, felt like it might burst with emotions he wasn't quite ready to name or examine too closely. They were building something here, this unlikely family thrown together by crisis and circumstance and choice, something real and valuable and worth protecting. And whatever came next, whatever challenges or changes waited in their future, they'd face it together. That's what families did. The real families, the chosen families, the ones built on love and respect rather than obligation or biology. They'd face it together.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.